SOMA, it is so good to be with you guys. I'm excited to see each and every single one of you. I'm glad that you are here. Some unfortunate news for most of you and some exciting news. I know Julia said first, but earlier in the evening I checked and Sam was the first on the chat again. So Sam, congratulations, you're back on the throne, back on top, which is always an exciting thing. Eli, you're first in spirit, but that doesn't count for anything, but still love and appreciate you. Nathan, it is so good to see you on the chat. Unfortunately, Amanda is not going to be here tonight. So, I mean, she's going to be heartbroken that you're here and she isn't, because last week she was asking about you so much. She's like, where's Nathan? We want to see Nathan in the chat. And so you have a very large fan in Amanda Lorino, and all of us are fans of you too, Nathan. Matthew McBride in the chat and on time. Really proud of you. Riley Tan, I know you were disappointed that you weren't first in the chat. Who else is watching? Caleb Warner, good to see you, buddy. I'm glad you're here. That's awesome. Go ahead, tell me what is going on with your guys' week. Who else is here? Who else is paying attention and listening? As always, I just want to catch up with you guys. I mean, we're not here, we're not in person, but tell me what's going on. Sorry you weren't there, you went bike riding with your dad and you got home late. That's an okay thing. I mean, last Tuesday was a gorgeous night, so why wouldn't you be doing that? Jalen, what is up? So glad that you are here. I assume Anakin is working as per usual. Julia Caldwell is here. Who else is my wife around? Quinn, where are you at? Big shout out, Quinn and I. Jordan, yes. Jordan, the old faithful Jordan is here. Who else is here? I want to see all of you guys. Quinn is here. Hi, Quinn. Hi, friend. Guys, exciting news. Quinn and I are eating chicken wings after this, making chicken wings at home. So that's exciting. Always a good time when there's chicken wings in the Marcellus household. What else is happening? Who else is here? Who else is paying attention? We're waiting for you. I'm waiting for you guys to DJ says as per usual. I mean, chicken wings are always a good thing in the Marcellus household, so it's a staple. It's a good thing. Every Tuesday night is wing night. I think a couple of Tuesdays ago I made fish, so not every Tuesday. We were doing it on Mondays for a while, watching The Last Dance, the Michael Jordan documentary. Eric Ween's in the chat, my man. What is up, Eric? Who else? Joel, Deb, you guys there? You paying attention? You alive? Who else is around and happening? Abby Caldwell, you there? Garrett, you there? Some of my favorite people for sure. Dawn, where are you at? Calling out all of the leaders to see. We finished The Last Dance. We watched all of it every Monday mostly. We'd watch both episodes and we absolutely loved it. Donald is here. Yes, Dawn, we are so glad that you are here. Who else is here? You're on episode 8. Oh man, so good. Honestly, like 2-3 months from now, I would for sure rewatch The Last Dance. Probably one of the greatest, in my opinion, greatest sports documentaries ever created. It was incredible. So you don't like sports, you should watch it, because even my wife loved it. And she is not a massive sports fan like I am, but she watched it and she loved it. So Gabby Cruz is on. Gabby Cruz, we're so glad that you are here and paying attention. Shout out if Elizabeth McBride is on the chat. Matthew, I don't know if your sister's on, but shout out to Elizabeth and shout out to Victoria. I'm not sure if you're on either. Kylie Jordan, we love and miss you. Not sure if you're watching. I'm just shouting out names that I can think of off the top of my head. But who else is here? No, she ain't. She at dance. All right, well, tell her we shout her out anyways. As always, shout out to Charlie. Big ups for Charlie. Big fan, big Charlie fan over here. Who else is here? Who else is paying attention and watching and joining us? Gabby, Julia misses you. So send her a text message, a TikTok, however you youth are connecting these days. Connect. They miss you. Stairs pointedly. Eli, I already shouted you out, man. Abby Caldwell is here. Yes, Abby, we were waiting for you. We're glad that you're here. Is Garrett with you? Are you guys doing a watch party? Garrett, we miss you as well. Miss seeing Garrett all the time. Miss getting, more importantly, miss getting hugs from Garrett. Gives quality hugs. So big hug fan, big Garrett fan, all around, miss it. So when this social distancing thing is over, big hug coming my way. Excited about it. Who else is on here? Anybody else new? What's happening? There's 17 people supposedly watching. So I don't know. Is Leia and Isaac and Jacob watching? Where are you guys at? Garrett puts bear hug to shame. It's true. It's true. Absolutely. Yeah. Are the Ardolines watching? Where are you guys at? The famous Ardolines. Tell me in 6 words or less. 6 words. How was your week? Give me the lowdown in 6 words or less. I'm gonna count them. 6 words or less. How was your week? I'm gonna go tell the Tans to join. That's 7 words, but Julia, it was very busy. Well, that's good. I mean, busy in this season is definitely a plus, especially as things open up and get back to a sense of normal. That is always a good thing. Busy is better than bored. So that's a good thing. What else? Tell me. Finished album, Woo, out tomorrow. Sick. Let us know. We'll pump it in the chat. Work and rest. That's good. Eric, I hope your back is feeling better. Jason's treating you well. Do you have to get more work done on it? Do you have to get some surgery, or what's the latest happening on your back? Fill us in. What up with the rest of you guys? What's the word? Gabby Cruz, tell us how your week is, or text Quinn and she'll put it in the chat for us. We're all so curious about how your week is going. Family movie nights every night. Are you guys watching a series, or what are you guys watching, Jay? What's on the Netflix schedule or the Disney Plus schedule? What else is happening there? How is Matthew? How's your week? I saw you by the Starbucks, homework and sleep. I think you were biking, and I assume that you're probably with Ryan. That would be my guess. Probably know by the end of this week or next if surgery is required. Okay, well, we will be praying for you, Eric. We hope that surgery is not required and that Jason is able to work his magic. I was back to work. I was back into work last week and most of this week. Definitely more than 6 words, but Joel, we are, it wasn't 1 word, but glad that you're back at work. I'm sure it's weird. Living the quarantine dream is Donald Warren. Yeah, you are, buddy. Lots of naps for Julia. I love it. Matthew doesn't do homework. Yes. And biking. And yes, I was with Ryan. And volunteer work. Lots of bike riding. Eric means facts, but it's catching up to me. We've been watching the first season of Survivor. My dad and I watched Waco, then Kim's Convenience, and Scrubs, and then movies. Scrubs is the greatest TV show of all time. I love Scrubs. One of my favorites. How are you guys watching it? Because it's not on Netflix. So do you have the DVDs? What's Netflix and chill? I've been watching The 100. Gabby Cruz doesn't have an account to comment, so she texted me. She's listening to what I said. I told her to text you. I love that. School is catching up too fast. Guys, there's less than a month left of school. And that's probably really weird because you haven't been in school for like the last 2 months. When I say like in school, I think most of you guys like know what I mean. I mean in school, but you've been doing school, but you haven't been in school unless you started going back this week. We bought the series. Dr. Cox is the best. I can quote Scrubs. Greatest TV show of all time. It was a sad day when it went off Netflix, but my parents' house in Ottawa, I actually own all of the DVDs of every season, and unfortunately, including season 9, which I don't really count because med school sucked. You went 15 more days. Nathan, what was it like to be back in school? Give us the Nathan update of what it was like to be back in school, because I don't have any idea. I was talking with Joel and Deb on Facebook Live on Sunday, if you caught our live lobby, but what it was like. Yeah, what was it? What's it like to be back in school? Jay, you and I can talk about Scrubs literally anytime because it is my favorite. Riley is too cool for school. Nathan, it was fun. How many people were there? Was there a lot of people, or were there just like a little bit or a short amount? I can imagine it's just like super weird to be in school. It feels like a ghost town. Deb, I can only imagine. I mean, you have like, I think you said like 5 to 8 kids, and you're like potting up. And so basically the seems beside everything is still online. Scrubs is how I wash the dishes. Okay, Riley, I see you. Scrubbing bubbles. Awesome. Well, I would love to get into the meat of the conversation tonight. There's a lot of things that we can talk about. There's some things in culture that I would love to address, because if you've been on Instagram today and your Instagram feed has just been covered in black pictures and Blackout Tuesday, you know that there's some very, very interesting tumultuous times that is happening in Canada and the US with the unfortunate murder that happened of George Floyd. And so there's a lot of things that we can talk about and we can address. But if you've been following along and if you've been with us, we're kind of just going through the book of Acts and talking about the early church. And so if you have your Bibles, or if you want to open up onto your device, I would love you guys to open with me to Acts chapter 4. And we're going to start in verse 13, and then we'll pull out a couple key thoughts out of verse 13, and then we'll continue the conversation, and then we'll break up into life groups. And so Acts chapter 4, starting in verse 13. Some context to what's happening in scripture at this moment. Peter and John have just preached to the 3,000. There's multiple people that have come to Christ, and they healed, as we saw last week. We saw them heal the lame beggar, and how that happened. And so that was an incredible act of compassion and kindness. And then in Acts chapter 4, mainly in verse 13, I want to talk specifically about this one event where everything that's happening in the Sanhedrin with the high priests, and there's this moment that's becoming politically charged, kind of like where we're at today, where they're preaching some pretty radical things. They're preaching some pretty controversial things that would be at the time, where they're calling Jesus Lord. They're seeing miracles happen, all of these things, and Peter and John ultimately they get taken aside, and they get pulled into almost like a jail, and they get pulled aside, and they begin to get questioned, and they begin to question what they're doing, what they're saying, all of these things that are happening. And then there's a moment of revelation that comes in verse 13 that says, when they saw the courage of Peter and John and realized that they were unschooled, ordinary men, they were astonished, and they took note that these men had been with Jesus. And I love that verse, and I believe I've spoken on it before, but the idea of you can be ordinary and unschooled. But when you've been in the presence of Jesus, your life looks radically different. When you've been in the presence of Jesus, your life will begin to look radically different. See, at this time that's politically charged and filled with civil unrest, ultimately there was a powder keg that was ready to explode. Jesus had just died. There's this activation of the church. People are being radically healed, radically saved. The church had grown from 3,000 to 5,000 within these first few chapters. And ultimately, what happens here is there was this moment where the leaders, Peter and John, were taken aside, and the people that had taken them aside, Caiaphas and the other people in the Sanhedrin, had taken them aside, and they recognized something inside of them, that they'd been with Jesus, that there wasn't anything special about them, but they'd been with Jesus. And as we can continue on, and we see eventually that they're let go and released, and they're allowed to go and continue speaking and preaching the gospel. And all of these things happen because their platform was built off of compassion. In verse 21, it says, after further threats, they let him go because they could not decide how to punish them, because the people were praising God for what had happened. For the man who was miraculously healed was over 40 years old. And so there was such a compassion that came upon them. And there was such a compassion that their platform had been built off of. There was such compassion and a care that launched them ultimately into a deeper love for people, that ultimately gave this platform to be able to speak into people's lives. Now, if you've been following any of the news, you would see that there's a lot of racism that has been happening. There's been a lot of civil unrest, there's been protests, and there's been riots. And I want to say some very strong statements, but I want to be very clear because, at SOMA, we've always been one to address culture and speak to it. And the first things first is that Jesus hates racism. Plain and simple, Jesus hates racism. It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter what form it takes. It doesn't matter when in history. Jesus hates racism. Furthermore, there's no place for racism in the church, and there's no place for racism in heaven. Jesus is loving, he's accepting, he's caring, and whenever there's hurt and pain, Jesus is present and available. And racism in culture is a very real thing. And some of us may have experienced it. Some of us may have be blind to it. But the idea of racism is very real and is very prevalent in culture today. And we need to address it. And we don't need to just address it for the sake of talking about it. We need to address it for the sake of living and changing and operating future. See, at SOMA, we've always been an accepting, loving people group. The idea of anybody being bullied or ostracized has been at the very core of who we are not. We are a loving group. We are fully inclusive. We call ourselves family for a reason. And what we're seeing in the politically charged nature of Canada in the United States is been quite opposite to that. There's been a lot of hate. There's been a lot of very unfortunate events that have happened, and so we need to be very, very clear that it's not just joining the conversation, but it's doing exactly what Peter and John did in Acts chapter 4. It is building our platform to speak off of a place of compassion, and it has to be off a place of compassion, because it is simply about loving people. It's simply about loving people, whether we agree with them or disagree with them. I was at my golf course this past Friday, and I was talking to one of the guys in the pro shop, and we were chatting and we were talking about stuff, and he was like, oh, he's in school, and he's talking about we were talking about the trade agreement with China for, economics. And then he was like, oh, what do you do? And I was like, oh, I'm a pastor. He's like, oh, that's really interesting. What church do you pastor at? And I was like, oh, I pastor at, Christian Life Assembly on 232nd. He's like, okay, I think I know where that is by Thomas Haney. I was like, yeah, that's right. He's like, I haven't been to that one. I was like, oh, do you go to church? And he's like, no, I don't go to church. I actually, I'm Hindu. I haven't been to temple in a long time. And he's like, I used to hate religion, but the older that I get, the more that I appreciate it and what it stands for. It stands for inclusivity. It stands for acceptance. And it was in that moment that I had opportunity to speak. I spoke truth and I spoke love. And it didn't matter that the color of his skin, it didn't matter what he did, it didn't matter anything. There was just an opportunity to view each other as people and could find common ground, whether we believed the same thing or not. And there was acceptance, and there was understanding, and there was compassion. And we need to understand, and I think we're very, very fortunate to live in Canada, where we live in a society that is very multicultural, that is, referred to as a mosaic. And I was talking to a couple of my friends in the States, and we were talking about the difference. He said, I think the difference between Canada and the US is that we still refer to people of color as African Americans instead of just Americans. And I was like, yeah, that's more or less not a thing in Canada. We kind of just refer to them as Canadians. And it was kind of this cultural moment where you realize how fortunate we are. But with that said, it's understanding that there is a very real divide, and there's very real undertones that is happening. Maybe we've experienced it or maybe we've not. But it comes back to, we have to base our lives, we have to base our foundation off loving people and being compassionate. It's not simply joining the conversation, but it's moving our actions towards compassion. It's loving people deeper, whether we understand them or don't. It's loving people further, whether we agree with them or not. I think of how Jesus acted in moments where, leading up to the cross, where Peter denied him and he still loved him. When the Roman guards came to arrest him, and even Peter there he cut off his ear, but Jesus healed him. There was real moments of deep compassion. If you go and you look at the miracles that Jesus did, it always is often preluded by the idea of he was moved with compassion. And so as Christians, we need to engage in conversation and engage in action by being moved towards people with compassion, because that's ultimately where life and change is going to happen. And I want to address the idea of very pointedly, Black Lives Matter. That movement was started in Ferguson, Missouri, just a city outside St. Louis. And whether you guys know this or not, I lived outside of St. Louis for a very brief moment in my life. And I was in Ferguson, where the foundations of Black Lives Matter started. And being there and wondering how such a politically charged and people group with so much unrest, how it had its roots there. And at the time, people would begin to say, it's not Black Lives Matter, Jordan, it's all lives matter. In the words of Judah Smith, a pastor in Seattle, I think he said it so brilliantly. It's not that all lives don't matter, but it's all lives don't matter until Black Lives Matter. And he's saying that because he's not trying to minimize the idea of that it's not all lives matter. I think we understand that. I think as a church, we understand that all lives matter. But it's understanding that there is a marginalized people group, and it may not be in our experience, and it may not be right here in Canada right now, but there's a marginalized people group, and it's Black Lives Matter, because they are marginalized, they're being ostracized, and there is extreme racism that is happening in our culture. And so Black Lives Matter is an important movement. And I can't say I agree with everything that's happened. I can't agree with the looting and the rioting, but the idea that there needs to be a cultural shift that has to happen where people are treated unequivocally as equal. And that begins, I believe it begins with the church. And there's strong roots of the church rising up in moments. And my admonishment to you, my encouragement to you as SOMA is love people deeper. See them how Christ sees them. And ultimately that begins, like I said so many times before, is being moved with compassion. It's being moved with compassion in these people. And it doesn't matter what grade you're in. It doesn't matter what age you are. It doesn't matter where you are or what you're doing. Ultimately, you can be an untrained person, but when they recognize that you've been with Jesus, people will be amazed. And that's ultimately the goal of what's going to happen. It's us personally being with Jesus so that our lives can be moved towards loving in other people. And it's a real cultural thing that's been happening. It's real. And if you've been on Instagram, I know that there's times where Quinn's been scrolling through Instagram and, we see some very, very unfortunate things. And, I would say that it breaks our heart because it's not okay. It's not okay for there to be any sort of racism and any sort of hate, because Jesus, everything I know about him is strictly inclusive. It says in Romans, while I was still a sinner, Christ died for me. And that's true. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter from who it is. While I was still a sinner, Christ died for me. He was moved with compassion that he went to a cross that he did not deserve, to die a death he didn't have to do, so that I could come close to him. And that's true for everyone. It's true for everyone. It has to be. Because if it's not true for everyone, then it wouldn't be true for me. But I base my life upon it. I base my foundation upon it, that Jesus died for everyone. He was moved with compassion and he died. And ultimately, I reap the rewards of that. And I would say you do too, because we could have a life that is so much better, so much deeper, so much further. I want to end this monologue, if you would, with Acts chapter 4 in verse 12, which I think is so beautifully written, because right after, in verse 13 is where I started. When they saw the courage of Peter and John, they realized they were unschooled, ordinary men, and they took note that they'd been with Jesus. Verse 12, I think, is such a perfect place to land this. Salvation is found in no one else. There is no other name under heaven given to mankind which we must be saved. And they're simply talking about Jesus. There's no other name under heaven which we must be saved. And so in this time of separation, in this time of divisiveness and being divided and being labeled, ultimately, there's no other name under heaven which we must be saved. And so if there's ever been a point of unity, now more than ever, it's Jesus Christ. It is Jesus who died, and it is the Jesus who is going to be our point of unity. And in this time, I think we're called to be the church. And the church is called to love. It's called to be with compassion. It's called to dive deeper into that. And, Soma, I want to say that I'm so proud of you and, being a part of this community and being able to lead and love with you guys. I've been nothing but amazed at all the people that have walked through the doors. I would say, I don't want to say 100%, but 99.9% has walked in and felt loved. They felt accepted and they felt cared for. And that's a part of who you are. You're loving, you're caring. And ultimately, I hope that we can become a better community that does that even better, because I think there's always room for improvement. I wouldn't change a thing about what we do, but I want us to love deeper. So when we gather, that people come in and they feel so loved and so accepted that they say, what is happening in this place? There must be something exciting. And we can just point and be like, it's the Jesus in us. That they were astonished, untrained, unskilled people, but they had recognized that we'd been with Jesus. And so with that said, I'm gonna put the life groups in the chat. But Soma, I love you. I'm really proud to be a part of this community. I think it's important to engage culture and engage in the conversation. I think it's very real time in our culture where we need to be educated, we need to be informed, but ultimately we need to be the church. We need to be the church, we need to love deeper, and we need to lead the way in this. Where some people would shy away from the conversation, I think this is where we engage and we stand up for injustice. We stand up for things that are not kingdom, and that we lead that charge in loving people. And ultimately, I think my prayer would be, God, break my heart for compassion. Break my heart for people, that I would recognize what is happening, that I would recognize who is speaking, and that I can dive deeper with them. Because I want to see people move towards Christ and what he's doing. And that would be my prayer. And I would hope that you guys would pray that as well. And let me say this, it's a really dangerous prayer. Because if you ask God to break your heart for people, he just might take you up on it. And I remember when I was 16, 17 years old, thinking about going into ministry, and God broke my heart for people. And it hurt. It hurt a lot because I see people hurting and broken, and I just want them to have the exact same thing that I have. And that's the hope of the world, is Jesus Christ. And so I would encourage you, pray that prayer, but be cautious, because he just might take you up on it. And when it does, it comes with some real sacrifice, but it's the best life that you can live. And so with that, I love you guys. I'm excited to see with you guys soon. Some exciting news is we have a leaders meeting this weekend. And so we will be conversing and talking about plans to meet live and in person. So hopefully next Tuesday we can announce something exciting for you, but that is in the pipeline to have SOMA live, social distance, soon. So tune in next week for an exciting announcement, but I'm excited to be with the leaders this weekend, and we're going to be praying and believing God for what's to come. SOMA, you guys are the best. Go ahead and jump into those life groups now. Love you guys.